A low bell hums, a heavy crown glints, and a small hand steadies fabric. Candles hiss along the nave, each flame a witness to borrowed certainty. The aisle is longer than childhood, softer than a promise kept. He waits at the rail. 29. Trained to turn gestures into policy. She steps forward. 6. Practicing balance more than joy, posture more than play. Is this a wedding or the tender presentation of a treaty to a crowd? Clerics murmur the words, ancient and careful as if syllables could purchase peace. Trumpets swell, but the melody feels like silk drawn taut across wood. A nod replaces consent, because breath is short and meanings are heavy. We describe events soberly without romance, because accounts differ and feelings mislead. The city cheers, yet a hush clings to the rail where vows are traded. Near term, a fragile calm settles over two courts that distrust their own reflections. Next, we follow the child behind the velvet, where identity becomes useful currency. A quill scratches, a ledger shuts, a nurse tightens a ceremonial sash. She is born into corridors that echo, not with lullabies, but directives. In these rooms, infancy is tallied like grain, weighed against borders and debts. Smiles are rehearsed before letters, curtsies before stories, posture before any favorite game. Her name carries dowries, escorts, and roots. Her steps carry expectations between doors. Which lesson arrives first in palaces like this? Kindness or the price of compliance? Courtiers speak softly, calculating futures. Tutors correct risks, not questions, in the nursery. Every ribbon is a reminder that fabric can guide a spine into service. Nannies repeat protocols that sound maternal, yet function like memorized diplomatic codes. This is not melodrama, it is administration, recorded by clerks and revised by politics. Ancient sources report tenderness and prudence, yet priorities remain legible. Stability before delight. Near term, she learns to stand perfectly still while adults bargain over movement. From here, we turn to the father who fears shattering, where even footsteps are padded. Soft shoes whisper. A crystal goblet rings. A chamberlain lowers his breath to nothing. Reports say the king fears shattering, asking attendants to move like wind over water. Courtiers remove spurs, pad benches, and speak in clauses that never jolt the air. He sits very still, certain his ribs are brittle panes set in a fragile frame. Can tenderness coexist with governance when the sovereign dreads his own heartbeat's percussion? Ministers learn substitution, signatures by proxy, councils by committee, decisions dispersed to safer rooms. Isabeau, pragmatic and steady, treats protocol as a tourniquet, tightening where stability leaks fastest. She counts loyalties, budgets festivals, and brokers silence, because silence spends cheaper than war. In such arithmetic, a daughter becomes leverage, gentle to hold, potent to exchange. This is not slander. Contemporaries contradict each other, yet patterns of accommodation remain credible. Nurses rehearse calm like liturgy, teaching the child to move without knocking reality. Near term, the palace perfects caution, and caution metastasizes into policy across the court. That policy trims noise, trims visits, and trims chances to be merely a child. From these trimmed edges, a more visible restraint appears, metal fitted where view meets air. We step with her to the window, where security learns to look like home. The lesson tightens. Gentleness is a rule, and rules arrive with iron fixtures. Next, we enter the nursery, whose shutters latch early and whose doors whisper no. Keys click twice. Chilled iron remembers dawn. A governess gathers curtains into obedient folds. She practices curtsy before alphabet, posture before penmanship, stillness before any unmeasured delight. When a page turns, it rustles like orders. When a latch drops, it sounds final. Barred windows claim practicality, yet bars teach grammar too. Subjects yield, objects stay put. What does reading mean when every corridor already instructs without a single written word? Lessons emphasize sequence, deference, and tone, so questions arrive folded inside safer questions. Nannies inventory toys, then lock them, because predictability is kinder than wide possibility. At night, footsteps pause outside. Metal clinks. Someone whispers that the king sleeps lightly. The child learns to count intervals between patrols, and to breathe where shadow permits. This is close observation, not theatrics. Households under strain spread caution like polished wax. Near term, routines harden, friendships thin, and language narrows to phrases that never alarm. She keeps a doll by the sill, practicing greetings that sound both brave and brief. Morning returns with trays, bows, and schedules, all arranged to minimize risk and chance. The skill is survival, but the cost is appetite, for noise, for games, for wonder. Meanwhile, across the channel, a crown measures trust in coins and in temporary truces. A proposal begins to form. Could a ceremony purchase quiet where taxes cannot? Next, envoys assemble lists, and a child's biography is redrafted as a diplomatic clause. Oars thud in rhythm. Tallies clack. A steward pins maps beneath brass weights. England counts debts in winter light, balancing parchment hopes against empty coffers and tempers. Councils speak of Ireland, of lords restless, of taxes resisted, of reputations thinning. Across the channel, France measures fatigue too, and wonders what quiet might cost. Can a ring plug a deficit faster than a levy and last longer than luck? Envoys rehearse compliments, then pack calculators of a gentler kind, genealogies, dowries, ceremonial schedules. They do not travel for romance. They travel to price an armistice in silk. At court, advisors praise prudence, hinting that peace stitched now could outlast winter. Skeptics mutter of vanity, but treasuries rarely argue against solutions that buy time. This is editorial sense, not cynicism. Contemporaries dispute motives, while fiscal pressure is plain. A child's name enters discussions as if a bridge had suddenly learned to walk. Her age is observed, her parentage endorsed, and her future defined with courteous ink. Near term, letters multiply, audiences are scheduled, and courtiers practice smiles that won't crack. Merchants whisper about cloth orders, minstrels about themes, and clerks about precedent and form. Meanwhile, the proposal hardens into itinerary because policy prefers dates to dreamy adjectives. Next, a room is prepared where strangers will assess childhood like a diplomatic asset. The inspection begins, delicate, officious, and certain it speaks for generations, not for one girl. Curtains lift, gloves are counted, a physician clears his throat before polite silence. Matrons consult lists: health, temperament, education, piety, proofs of blood, and household aptitude. They note small hands, steady gaze, compliant posture, and the careful absence of mischief. Is dignity possible when childhood is handled like porcelain and evaluated like a prized hawk? Questions circle gently, never quite about her wishes, always about promise, lineage, and use. A scribe records impressions with perfect curves, as if handwriting could certify a future. The language stays legal, not tender. Ancient accounts differ, but the tone remains clerical. Draft clauses unfurl: truce length, dowry tranches, escorts, jurisdictions, custody, precedents for disputes. One line grants the king household rights: attendance, precedence, access, while conjugal matters wait lawful age. Paper simplifies what life will complicate. Signatures will outlive the childhood they promise to spare. Near term, boxes of seals, ribbons, and copies are ordered, indexed, and locked away. She receives a lesson about ceremony. Applause travels faster than comfort across cold water. Appraisers finish their nods. The scribe sands ink. Courtiers praise wise moderation in chorus. Officials insist this is ordinary prudence. We note the ordinariness as the sharpest edge. Next, the clauses step from draft to decree, shaping meals, tutors, journeys, and doors. And from decree to needlework, the whole machine turns toward a wedding measured in bolts. Paris will hum with seamstresses, musicians, and rumors, because paper always summons pageantry. Locks test smoothly. A counselor folds the decree. Attendants memorize the new routine. Household rights are granted to the king. Visits, precedence, attendance, while conjugal matters wait lawful age. Doors will open at his approach. Corridors will be cleared. Schedules will bend on command. What does safety mean when access itself is guaranteed by ink and witnessed by prayer? A guardian is appointed, then two, then several, each sworn to vigilance and gracious tone. Nurses learn when to withdraw, not if. Proximity becomes a sacrament performed without blemish. Confessors are selected for discretion, tutors for obedience, physicians for delicate endurance over time. Ancient accounts differ on warmth and intent. The mechanism, however, stays legibly administrative. She is measured by wakefulness, appetite, lessons, and tears, numbers written beside proper nouns. Meals shorten, greetings lengthen. Every gesture is coached to prevent offense and invite reassurance. Near-term, surveillance thickens while harm is promised thin. Comfort depends on choreography, not consent. She acquires a vocabulary of gentle refusals and learns which rooms allow smaller breaths. Gifts arrive books, ribbons, miniatures, each tagged with the giver's heraldry and unspoken expectations. The bedchamber remains bounded by law, yet law cannot shrink the press of attention. Night arrives with quieter boots, but the threshold is never entirely hers again. Next, Paris hums toward spectacle, bolts of cloth, new songs, and an itinerary fixed. The needles begin their race, and the city pretends labor is only about beauty. Shears bite cloth, chalk marks bloom, a tailor hums a victorious little scale. Courtyards fill with looms, dyers, embroiderers, and carts that smell of resin and wool. Poets rehearse verses about prudence, comparing childhood to lilies that calm fierce rivers. Does splendor prove benevolence, or simply drown doubt beneath trumpets and sweetened wine? Seamstresses pass pins like sparks, stitching symbols that promise peace in gold thread. A chamber tries 3 veils, another counts pearls, a third trains pages to bow. Minstrels test harmonies that suggest hope, never grief. Grief is bad for patrons. Cooks grind spices until the air feels warm, even while hallways stay cold. Courtiers praise foresight, claiming this wedding will season tempers and secure harvests. The child practices steps between fittings, memorizing turns that reduce tripping and tears. Her doll receives a matching ribbon because some mercies can be scaled for comfort. Ancient chroniclers disagree about delight. The bustle, however, is unanimous and expertly funded. Near term, the departure date hardens, trunks are sealed, and passports glitter with wax. People say the journey will be joyous. The map reads like a test of composure. Partings are scheduled, limited to minutes, and supervised by faces trained not to wince. A mother straightens a sleeve, holds too long, then releases because protocol must proceed. Next, we leave the Louvre behind and ride toward Calais where treaties change hands. The road is loud with celebration. The carriage is quiet with a single heartbeat. Hooves drum, pennants snap, a clerk counts trunks with a beat-and whisper rhythm. Farewells at the Louvre are scheduled like audiences, brief, formal, careful with sleeves and vowels. Mothers hold longer than custom allows, then release because custom still governs grief. The road north unspools through markets and mist. Escorts change, lists keep growing. At Calais, satin tents rise like a fair, bright against a disciplined wind. Is ceremony consolation, or simply a way to keep tears from staining parchment? Tables display seals, ribbons, copies. Interpreters confirm phrases that refuse to soften themselves. She grips her doll until the stitches complain, because fabric answers when words fail. Officials bow, witness, and exchange custody with gestures that look almost like blessing. Ancient accounts differ on warmth. The choreography, however, is exact and well practiced. Gifts pass one direction, assurances the other. The crowd hums with satisfied logistics. Near term, the document acquires a heartbeat, and that heartbeat now rides under another flag. She watches the shoreline shrink into a line, then a rumor, then weather. A steward kneels to review her new titles, pronouncing syllables that feel like polished stones. Supper is served on schedule. Night arrives on time. Sleep ignores both invitations. The sea keeps its own counsel, lifting the hull as if testing each promise. Next, the company turns west, and language turns with it. Familiar voices thin quickly. England prepares welcome scenes. The crossing teaches how welcomes can bruise without raising hands. Gulls angle low, rigging whistles. A boatswain counts breaths between orderly waves. At the threshold, French attendants are thanked, inventoried, and dismissed with precise courtesy. New faces take their places, bright with duty and vowels shaped by another shore. Can celebration replace comprehension when the room's kindest word arrives without its meaning? Musicians strike cheerful marches. Children wave ribbons. Cooks build towers from sugared fruit. A herald explains emblems in English. She nods, reading posture rather than sentence. Pages practice names that feel too large. She practices silence that feels correct. This is not tragedy performed. It is welcome as designed and expertly provisioned. Ancient sources report amazement and poise. The absence of her voice is consistent throughout. Near term, greetings multiply while intimacy evaporates. Comfort narrows to rhythm, not to words. She learns which smiles end questions and which smiles invite more manageable ones. The coach rolls through towns rehearsed for wonder. Petals fall, doors open on cue. Trumpets bloom at bridges. Laughter echoes against stone. The river takes their noise downstream. Night offers a smaller vocabulary: blanket, candle, prayer, each dependable, none sufficient. By morning, routes merge toward the capital. where spectacle scales from streets to vaults. She watches flags teach the sky new colors, and the sky learn them quickly. Next, Thames water widens, barges assemble, and Westminster prepares to translate policy into pageant. Ceremony approaches at full brightness. The child rehearses shadows where rest might fit. River bells chatter, ropes creak, barges shoulder water that smells of lime and tar. Pennants stripe the breeze, guilds line keys, singers practice refrains easy to remember aloud. The city converts carpenters into stagehands and merchants into quartermasters for magnificence. Windows bloom with cloth, balconies spill herbs, apprentices scatter rushes to tame the dust. Does brightness heal suspicion, or only reassign it to shadows behind banners and cheers? Bridges crowd with spectators, boats pull rank, a coronet glitters like a commanded sunrise. Children on steps copy bows they saw in drawings, hoping accuracy earns approving nods. Trumpets answer trumpets, drums fold their edges, the river itself seems to keep time. At Westminster, vaults drink the noise and return it slower, polished by stone. Attendants pace the nave, measuring footsteps into beats that dignify every necessary pause. Cloth of gold whispers against itself. Torches trim darkness into respectful symmetrical panels. Officials confirm order, precedence, and route, because theater collapses when queuing fails. Ancient accounts differ on exact songs and colors. Their consensus is disciplined spectacle. Near term, the capital breathes easier, persuaded that peace has choreography and taste. She stands beneath a canopy, reading faces as if faces were safer than words. A cushion waits for knees. The ring waits for a finger still learning rings. The pageantry promises comfort by weight and number, not by understanding or consent. Next, within arm's length of the altar, the question narrows to a single answer. Drums hush, incense lifts, a thin voice rehearses vows older than the stone. The cleric lowers his gaze to hers, shrinking formality to the height of courage. Hands present the ring. Silk breathes, a hush gathers like snow on covered branches. Is consent a word, a gesture, or silence others decide to interpret as consent? She answers with a nod, measured carefully. Small enough for safety, large enough for record. He replies in syllables trained to carry policy, steady as a document read aloud. Witnesses lean into stillness, wax hardens, quills wait for movement to restart the world. Ancient sources disagree about tears. They agree the ritual proceeded without collision or delay. The kiss arrives briefly, gentle, and primarily liturgical. More signal than tenderness, more cue than claim. Applause wakes the nave, banners lift, relief passes over rows like earned rain. Near term, bells declare compliance, ports will open, escorts will ride, and tariffs will soften. She practices a grateful smile that closes questions and preserves air for the next hallway. Officials plot the procession's exit, guarding momentum from speeches that bend toward indulgence. A chamberlain gathers the ring's box. A sacristan rescues petals from impatient boots. Outside, horses stamp messages into straw, eager to move the narrative forward. Inside, the child counts heartbeats to steady her hands between rehearsed courtesies. The treaty stands now on legs named custom, ledger, escort, chaperone, and household right. Next, tables stretch into distance, and night will test promises under softer kinds of light. Platters glide, lutes thread brightness, a steward taps goblets into punctual agreement. Tables lengthen until the hall seems built to measure appetite rather than air. Toasts rise in careful waves, praising prudence, lineage, patience, and the genius of timing. Can music sweeten policy, or does policy simply borrow music's costume for an evening? Servers balance sauces and diplomacy. Guests balance laughter and glances toward the sovereign pair. She sits small in embroidery, learning how applause feels when it chooses a body. Dancers turn patterns that imply harmony, as if geometry could guarantee tomorrow's headlines. Chroniclers vary on counts and dishes. Consensus holds that spectacle did its precise work. A chamber is readied nearby, warmed, inspected, and layered with witnessable propriety. The phrase, "nothing untoward," will travel far, because phrases sometimes do heavier lifting than facts. He withdraws with retinue. She is undressed by matrons whose gentleness is professionally practiced. What rests when rest requires an audience, and every courtesy proves a lock with ribbons. Near term, privacy becomes itinerary, and mercy becomes scheduling. Soft, supervised, impressively documented. She sleeps in pieces, waking to recitations about comfort that feel like weather reports. By morning, gifts assemble, books, miniatures, small animals, and promises to ride soon. Smiles practice sincerity. The routine practices itself. Officials praise the wisdom of a gentle pace. Next, they build a little household around her, bright, resourceful, and engineered to be safe. And there the question returns: is safety a shelter or a tool for reshaping? Sun through lattice, a white pony stamps, a tutor arranges letters into friendly rows. She receives a small library, a music teacher, and attendants fluent in her mother tongue. Doorways are padded with courtesy. Errands appear as play. Afternoons arrive signed and initialed. Is tenderness protection or choreography? Kind hands guiding habits toward someone else's desired horizon? Walks are mapped, stables are quiet. A dollhouse mirrors rooms she navigates every day. Smiles feel real, yet scheduled. Consolations feel warm, yet trained to end precisely on time. Historians argue about affection and strategy. Both can coexist, and often do in palaces. Lessons emphasize poise over wonder. Music prizes control over noise. Letters prefer grace over candor. The pony learns a loop that never touches gates. She masters gratitude for the loop. Kindness arrives with keys. That is the twist. Kind jailers keep the tidiest calendars. Near term, her world grows comfortable, smaller, and increasingly legible to those issuing reports. She learns to ask for almost nothing, since almost nothing is always quick to approve. At dusk, a trusted lady reads aloud. The story pauses where futures normally widen. Night lingers at the threshold, listening as if permission could be granted to sleep. Morning returns with plans for outings, audiences, and smiles that photograph well on parchment. She holds her doll, practicing sentences that sound brave enough to survive transcription. Next, the stage widens again. Crowds return, and policy resumes its appetite for display. The city has rehearsed its cheers. The household has rehearsed its bows. Both proceed. Torches spit. Laughter corners echo. A jester jingles bells that prefer quieter rooms. Feasts become theaters. She is seated as centerpiece while jokes orbit like wasps. Courtiers test innuendo, measuring reactions, then wrapping offense inside compliments and wine. When does display become a lesson that the body exists for other people's plots? Pages gossip in corridors about ripeness, airs, and readiness, words too large for her. She tastes fruit, smiles on cue, and learns which silences end a line of questions. A lady revises her letters home, removing adjectives that might read like accusation. Scribes copy approved versions, attaching seals that make every memory look obedient and calm. This is stagecraft as governance. Sources diverge on tone, but not on method. She practices gratitude that closes doors. Survival often speaks in pleasantries and bows. Near term, her reputation hardens into phrases decorous, meek, promising, that officials can defend in council. She grows fluent in respectful evasions, protecting small private spaces no inventory can list. Poets hymn her composure. Minstrels praise her patience. Both are paid to like the script. At night, she counts the laughs she did not understand, then prays for fewer. Dawn brings errands to guilds, gifts to churches, and rehearsals for yet another procession. The doll receives new ribbons, evidence that kindness exists and can be carried. Next, calm shatters in a larger chamber. Thrones rearranged, banners replaced, and loyalties priced again. History tilts quickly. The crown that kissed her brow will answer to different hands. Boots hurry, seals crack, a privy council meets before the ink can dry. Rumor gathers mass, becomes proclamation, then law. The throne tilts without breaking floors. He is unmade by cousins and creditors. She becomes a widow, still learning letters. Does allegiance move with crowns, or do people simply pretend until schedules stabilize again? Her apartments shrink to corridors, guarded by courtesy, and keys that never quite sleep. Visitors bow deeper. Questions grow fewer. Future plans refer to her as leverage. Inventories list jewels, tapestries, and a girl, a category both human and administrative. Chroniclers disagree on kindness. They agree she stayed under careful watch and honored captive. New rulers speak of prudence, of necessity, of keeping promises tidy and visible. She receives condolences written by men who just rearranged her life like furniture. Near term, letters to France slow, then resume through intermediaries who prefer spotless margins. She bargains for familiar faces, for safer hours, for the right to keep her doll. A portrait is commissioned, documenting composure that took a month of practice to hold. Elsewhere, Councils test the market for matches that repair alliances and soothe resentments. Proposals arrive wearing politeness. She answers with silences that require no translation. Ceremony once promised shelter, now ceremony protects the arrangement that keeps her in place. Next, a pen grows defiant. She writes carefully, folding refusal inside phrases like do. The page becomes a room where she is more than a clause between signatures. Wax warms, sand blots. A cautious scribe watches as she chooses every word. Her letters praise health, honor, and God, then slip requests between courteous parentheses. She declines the plan to remarry locally, invoking vows, conscience, and lawful custom. How sharp can refusal sound when the only allowed blade is elegant Latin? She learns the shapes that censors overlook, metaphors about seasons, hymns, and household routines. Trusted women carry memorized addenda, reciting the parts paper cannot safely hold. Officials remark on diligence. They prefer obedience embroidered with gratitude and quiet verbs. This is resistance deployed as etiquette. Sources diverge on authorship, not on intention. She asks for tutors she chooses, hours she controls, and visits she can end. Courtiers call these requests reasonable, then limit them gently, the way one trims lamps. Near-term delays multiply, proposals cool. Her pageant value dips without vanishing entirely. She discovers leverage and reputations, piety, patience, and an audience that likes the story. A sealed answer arrives from home, promising advocacy if windows stay open to compromise. She nods in the right rooms and prays in the ones without witnesses. Meanwhile, negotiations thicken, the channel narrows, and names once whispered return in daylight. Hope rehearses a route, from hall to barge to shore, with faces she remembers. Next, the tide turns favorable, escorts gather, and a homecoming acquires its necessary verbs. All journeys cost a currency. She pays with composure and the stamina to wait. Keys wake, masts stipple sky. A trumpet tries optimism and nearly succeeds. Delegations meet, exchange blessings, and verify lists that finally tilt toward mercy. She steps onto French stone lighter, older, and practiced at smiling without permission. Will belonging return on contact, or has the map replaced what home used to mean? Halls feel familiar, but voices have rearranged themselves into careful new hierarchies. Her father's gaze flickers, tender, then distant, the mind's weather crossing without warning. Attendants adjust expectations, doctors advise routine, priests recommend patience that sounds like surrender. Chroniclers differ on recognition. Agreement holds that protocol cushioned what could not be mended. She receives rooms, wardrobes, and schedules, along with admiration shaped like advice. Letters of thanks travel outward. Plans for tomorrow travel not quite as fast. Near term, she is safe, cataloged, and gently steered toward matches that soothe factions. In courtyards, banners multiply. In council, arithmetic resumes. In gardens, she remembers to breathe. A portraitist catches steadiness that costs more than pigments will ever admit. At vespers, she asks softly whether peace can survive without using a child's name. The question stays. The candles answer only with warmth that cannot sign decrees. Elsewhere, unrest stirs. Alliances need stitching, and the seamstress is always expensive. Next, a new proposal arrives. Closer to her age, closer to home, and called wise. Hope wears practical shoes. The future, this time, promises fewer keys and kinder doors. Church bells steady. Anterooms breathe. A calmer court scripts vows within reachable seasons. He is nearer in years, thoughtful in letters, and fluent in delays that help. Gifts include books, music, and the promise of rooms with doors she can close. Can tenderness survive the math of dynasties, or does arithmetic eventually price it too? Witnesses sign, musicians favor comfort over thunder. The feast tastes more like household than theater. Walks extend beyond courtyards. Conversation wanders past protocol. Laughter arrives without rehearsal. Physicians praise health, then hedge. Experience has instructed them to speak like measured rain. Chroniclers diverge about the couple's temperaments. Consensus notes an ordinary kindness rare in palaces. She writes fewer guarded letters and more that name small joys without disguises. Time, however, keeps its own accounts. Winter interrupts, and illness casts longer shadows. Near term, prayers gather at bedsides. Midwives are summoned, and corridors grow too quiet. A whisper runs ahead of news, then slows into that hush courtiers refuse to break. Ink dries before certainty. Outcomes sit between doors, the way hope sits between breaths. Scribes choose gentle phrasing, bells choose intervals that do not frighten children. When results arrive, they do so unevenly, comfort here, grief there, and silence elsewhere. Rooms are aired, linens folded, and gratitude offered for mercies that feel inadequate. Next, pages turn harder, a life folds early, and stories learn to tread lightly. We step carefully because endings deserve modesty where evidence is thin or contested. Frost rims leaded panes. A clerk writes 3 lines that carry too much world. She dies very young. The record keeps its distance. Tidy and spare by habit. Is remembrance an antidote to policy or merely another way to file a life? Eulogies mention lineage, prudence, and potential, the palace trinity for orderly sorrow. Friends remember a voice that preferred soft humor to spectacle and reading to crowds. Chroniclers disagree on final causes. What agrees is brevity, both the life and the page. A procession occurs, correct and unstartling. Grief is permitted exactly where planners allow. The doll is boxed, the pony is gifted. Books receive new inscriptions and shelves. Near term, alliances tighten around the vacancy because timetables dislike empty lines. A seamstress removes initials from a gown, then stores it flat between clean papers. Portraits continue to visit walls, their painted eyes patient with the rooms they keep. In archives, clerks index her name among instruments that once purchased partial silences. We owe plainness here. The evidence is fragmentary, and later retellings supply unwarranted romance. Candles gutter, doors close, the household reforms around duties that never learned to mourn. Across the channel, men argue harvests, taxes, and marches, just as before. The world continues, competent and incurious. History often behaves like that when children are involved. Next, we widen the lens, counting other names conscripted into gentle-looking paperwork. The pattern clarifies. Treaties lean on bodies least able to object in public. Ledgers thicken, altars glitter. A herald recites names that share a quiet arithmetic. Margaret smiles from a miniature, Philippa from a seal, both attached to clauses about ports. Girls without portraits fill the margins. Dowries recorded, voices unrecorded, outcomes guessed by context. How many treaties stand because childhood was treated as a renewable diplomatic resource? Chairs scrape in councils, maps acquire ribbons, monasteries copy contracts beside homilies on mercy. Ambassadors praise restraint, then request audiences for new matches shaped like yesterday's solution. This is continuity disguised as prudence. Sources list dates, not feelings, almost by design. In households, nannies teach posture. In chancelleries, clerks teach precedent. Both claim to protect. Plays later soften these bargains into romances. We resist that softness out of fairness. Near-term generations inherit customs that call control by warmer names, guardianship, stability, honor. Pain survives as rumor, lullaby, superstition, and the careful way doors are closed. Occasionally, a letter escapes the formula and writes want in unapologetic ink. Those letters we keep close because clarity is rare and costs the writer dearly. Meanwhile, the idea persists that grandeur redeems bargains struck with very small hands. Publics applaud, poets compete, and the market for pageantry never reports a downturn. Tomorrow's ceremonies will claim improvement and sometimes deliver it, but frequently misprice the human. Next, we return to the single story we began and weigh its remainder. From that weight, a present tense question rises about value, consent, and how we name care. Vaults echo, parchment breathes, a historian closes one book and reaches for another. The pattern is not secret. Power prefers tidy stories where peace wears silk. When childhood becomes instrument, language adjusts. Safety means supervision. Affection means compliance on schedule. Which words break the habit first? Rights, consent, or merely the courage to say no? Ceremony is not the villain. It is the costume policy wears when audiences gather. We document without romance, because accounts differ and evidence is scattered, sometimes by intent. The lesson travels forward. Question: beauty that asks children to pay for adult quiet. Schools can teach posture and conscience. Courts can teach precedent and harm. Both can change. Near term, our reading alters how we praise. Applause learns limits. Vows learn conditions. We practice naming harms directly, even when pages prefer euphemism and carefully lit corridors. This was one child's biography, yet it intersects with ledgers, fleets, and fields of wheat. The scale is the warning. When tiny hands steady treaties, the tremor is everyone's. Archives cannot hug back, but they can refuse to flatter. That is their small mercy. From that mercy, reform can proceed. Slowly, stubbornly, with fewer keys on little belts. The bridges we build now should carry children away from paperwork, not into it. Change begins in rooms where questions are welcome, and answers must honor the smallest voice. Next, we close the book gently, then look outward to our own rituals and rules. If we are careful, beauty will remain, and consent will finally outrank choreography. Bells quiet, candles gutter. The nave breathes like a tired animal at peace. We tracked a single treaty as it crossed a child's life, trading risk for shine. Was the calm worth the cost, or did calm merely delay debts that others paid? Near term, the record keeps yielding lessons. Inspect pageantry, weigh consent, distrust euphemism on parchment. Two courts bought time with lace and vows. Both lost it the moment crowns shifted. A mechanism called household right normalized access and taught language to praise compliant children. Sources disagree on warmth. They agree that policy ran smoothly over very small feet. We keep our tone plain because fragmentary evidence deserves modesty more than thunder. From here, look to present rituals, schools, contracts, ceremonies, and ask who bears their quiet price. If care is real, it will endure hard questions without borrowing trumpets for cover. The story opens outward. How might treaties be written so children are never clauses? We can build customs that favor consent first and still leave beauty standing in the light. That is the work within reach, the work that needs neither crowns nor choirs. Now the doors open. The night is ordinary again, and the question remains, will we applaud differently tomorrow, choosing dignity that does not requisition childhood? If so, the hush after music will finally sound like rest, not like relief.